we're doing today. Just everybody into the Zoom. Okay, so Parshas Chana, and again, this is the whole Sefer Devarim is as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu's sort of last sermons and last words to Klal Yisrael. The whole Sefer Devarim takes place in the 5-week period from Chodesh Shvat to Zayin Adar. This is the last month of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. And so everything in this Sefer is really Moshe Rabbeinu's, last guidance to Klal Yisrael. And so I want to take a look at Parshas Chanan. There's so much to talk about. Moshe Rabbeinu reviews the whole desert experience, and he reviews the Har Sinai experience. We have the 10 Commandments and Shema Yisrael. There's so much here in Parshas Chanan. But I want to take a look. When I was preparing this shiur, I was actually, and sometimes this happens to me, where I'm preparing the shiur and I have sort of the direction that I want to go in, and I have the idea that I want to impart, and then I try to sort of find other parts of different commentaries that sort of bolster this idea, and I end up as I'm looking through the different commentaries, finding a piece that is completely and totally unrelated. But it was so interesting and fascinating to me that I felt like, okay, I'm scratching that shiur and I'm giving this piece because this piece was so fascinating to me. And that's the situation with this week's shiur in Parshas Chanan. Yeah. So when I was preparing the shiur, I opened up the Kedushas Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, and I went through the entire Kedushas Levi because we haven't done Kedushas Levi in a while, and I wanted to see if there's anything there that the Kedushas Levi says that was bolstering sort of the idea that I had. And I'm going through the entire Kedushas Levi, the very last piece in Parshas Chanan, which speaks about the very last pasuk in the parsha, was a whole piece on reincarnation. And I'm fascinated by reincarnation. It's one of my favorite topics. Why it works, how it works, what its purpose is. And what a beautiful piece about reincarnation. So I figured, okay, you know what? This piece was so interesting. I'm going to share this with the shiur. So I'm going to open up the screen. We're going to do this. We're going to do this piece together. Hey, Farah. Good morning. Okay. So again, this is the very last pasuk in Parshas Chanan. And what's fascinating is, well, let's open up the piece. Let's quote the pasuk, because there's a very strong connection between the last pasuk in this week's parsha and the first pasuk in next week's parsha. Now, usually, whenever you have sort of separate parshas, these are separate topics, but here it's almost as if the parshas divide and separate literally in the middle of an idea. So let's take a look. I'm going to share the screen with you. This is the Kedushas Levi. Let me just get my annotator here. Okay, so let's take a look. Why did that happen? I didn't do that. One second. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's what I need to do. Let's do it a little bit. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the pasuk is, again, this is the piece. If you're here in person, it's on the first page, left-hand side. V'shamarta es hachukim v'es hamishpatim, and you should keep the chukim and the mishpatim, which are various types of mitzvahs. Again, just keep in mind, this is Moshe Rabbeinu's sort of last will and testament to the Jewish people, his last guidance. So all of the verses here and all of the guidance here is meant not simply for this generation, but this is Moshe Rabbeinu's last words to all of us. So he says, "V'shamarta es hachukim v'es hamishpatim asher anochi mitzavacha hayom la'asosam." So you should guard the chukim and the mishpatim, asher anochi mitzavacha, which I have commanded you. Again, he's quoting this in the name of Hashem. Hayom la'asosam, today to do them. That's the last pasuk in the parsha. And then the very next pasuk, the first pasuk in Parshas Eikev, is V'haya Eikev Tishman, and if you will do this, but it doesn't say V'im Tishmun, if you will do this. It says V'haya Eikev Tishman. It's almost, and because you will do this. It's almost as if the Jews don't have free choice. Because you will do this, because you will guard the chukim and the mishpatim, then I will shemarta sabris. I will keep the covenant that I promised Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Okay, so it's almost as if this is all sort of one thought. Hashem is asking us and beseeching us, keep all of the mitzvahs, hayom la'asosam, today, keep them all today, and when you will keep them, I will keep my covenant. That's the beginning of next week's Parsha. But this is all part of sort of one clause. It's all part of one idea. So why does the Parsha why does the Parsha end in the middle of the thought? Keep the mitzvahs today, and then next week, Parsha, continuing that thought, when you will keep them. So this is what the Kedushas Levi is going to speak about. And he brings just an absolutely fascinating idea that this is all connected to reincarnation. So let's take a look at this piece. Okay. And then we'll do one of the footnotes here too. I hope we'll have the time because there's a fascinating footnote here as well that just goes into reincarnation in greater depth. But people, reincarnation is one of the beliefs, certainly in the mystical branch of Judaism. And people ask, well, where is it alluded to in the Torah? And here you have a situation where it's alluded to in the Torah, right here, according to Kedushas Levi. So he says as follows: L'cheira kasha. He has a question. Mahu smichas haparsha zeh lezeh. What's the connection of the end of Parshas Veschanan and the beginning of Parshas Eikev? Why is that divided up? Why is it divided up? You clearly have a strong connection between the two concepts. It's almost like one clause. Why is it divided up into two different Parshas? Va'ed mahu lashon tishma'u, the mashma bal korcham. It's not saying, and if the Jews will do this, if you will do this, ve'im tishmun, it doesn't say. It says, v'haya ekev tishmun, and because you will do this, and it uses this funny lashon of ekev, which is not really normally a normal word for because. Ekev literally means heel. It's where Yaakov gets his name from, because he was grabbing Esav's heel. So ekev means sort of the end or the heel of something. So why does it use that lashon as well? Is another question that Kedushas Levi doesn't ask. But why this lashon v'haya? Why this expression v'haya ekev tishmun? And when you will do this, it's almost as if it's by force you will do this. You don't have free choice. You will ultimately end up fulfilling all of the mitzvahs. So Kedushas Levi gives an explanation here, beautiful explanation. Ach yedua b'kisvei harizal. It's known from the writings of the Arizal, which is today appropriate. Sunday was the yahrzeit of the Arizal, which is coming from the Arizal's yahrzeit. Hey Menachem Av is the Arizal's yahrzeit, which is Sunday. So it's known in the Kisvei Harizal be'inyan hagilgulim, when it comes to the concept of reincarnation. The Arizal writes, the Adam tzurich legalgal kama pa'amim, that the vast majority of us are reincarnated multiple times. Ad yisakin is called myself haroi, until we rectify all of our internal negativity, or all of our internal, or all of our actions that we've done that need rectification. So I'm just trying to see if I could see. I can't tell if somebody's coming into the. Oh, here we go. Yep, I have a whole bunch of people in the waiting room. There you go. Let's get everybody in here. Okay. So we're continuing this piece at the bottom of the piece. So again, so the Arizal writes that reincarnation happens to us multiple times to rectify our actions, to rectify our mistakes. So we're all here to refine certain parts of our personalities, certain parts of our character, and those aspects that are unrefined, are those mistakes that we make in this world that are uncorrected. We have to come back here to correct them, says the Arizal. Ulezeh kivnu aksuvim, and says Kedushas Levi, this is actually the meaning or the message behind our verses here, the end of the parsha. Ksuv ma'ela, when it says, it's in the back of the page if you're here in person. So it says, "V'shamarta es hachukim hayom la'aseisim." It says in the very last pasuk of our parsha, "You shall guard the mitzvahs hayom la'asosam," today to do them. So says the Kedushas Levi, hayom la'asosam is a remez. It's alluding to something. You'll do the mitzvahs hayom, today, in this incarnation. Ratza Leimar, the pasuk means to tell us. Ha'etza teva lefanecha. The pasuk is giving us Moshe Rabbeinu, giving us his most powerful, positive, important advice. That the mitzvahs you should do, hayom lasos, you should do as much as you are capable of doing now, while you're alive now, today, in this incarnation. Shetishmer la'ases as achukim v'amishpatim b'pam harishon. That you should strive to fulfill all of the mitzvahs b'pam harishon, your first time around, or at least this time around, this incarnation that we're here now. Do it hayom la'asos. Don't put off refining something or rectifying something till tomorrow, because who knows? Nobody knows if tomorrow will come or not. Do them now, in order that you do not need to be incarnated again or reincarnated again to fulfill that which you were lacking now. V'zehu, and this is what it means. So the end of our pasuk, the end of our parsha, says you should keep shmartes achukim v'samishpatim. You should keep all of the mitzvahs hayom, now, in this incarnation, in this Gilgul. And then it says, and then the pasuk in the beginning of next week's parsha, the very next pasuk says, "V'zehu v'haya ekev tishmun," and when you will fulfill them, when you will listen to the mitzvahs, and it uses the word ekev. V'yidua she'ekev hu lashon sof. Ekev means the end of something, the heel of something, meaning to say that if you don't keep the mitzvahs now, if you're lacking something in Avodas Hashem now, if you're leaving something unrefined, uncorrected, unrectified, Vahaya Akev, safe, call safe, in the very end, after all of your incarnations, Tishmu, you will ultimately have to fulfill all of the mitzvahs. You will keep coming back until in the end you will fulfill all the mitzvahs. That's why it uses the word Akev. In the end, Tishmu, you will listen to all the mitzvahs. You will fulfill the mitzvahs. You will keep coming back in incarnation after incarnation. Ratza Lemar, and this is what the verses, the juxtaposition is telling us. And that's why I think, although the Kedushas Levi doesn't say this explicitly, that's why the Parsha ends in the middle of this thought and begins. It's talking about two separate incarnations. Keep all the mitzvahs now, end of our Parsha. And if you don't keep all the mitzvahs now, beginning of the next Parsha, meaning the beginning of another life. It's the beginning of another incarnation. Vahaya Ekev Tishmun. At the end, after all of your reincarnations, Tishmun, you will keep all of the mitzvahs because you'll keep coming back until you do them. So that's why it seems the Parsha ends in the middle of the thought. It's the end of our Parsha is talking about one incarnation, where we are today. Vahaya Akev, and at the end, if you don't listen to all the mitzvahs, if you don't refine things, if you don't rectify what we need to rectify, safe call safe will come back in multiple reincarnations to rectify things. So that's the beginning of next week's parsha is talking about future incarnations. Vahaya Akev at the end. Okay. So Ratza Lemar, meaning to say Halei Hasayf Yish Halei Hasayf Yeh Shetei Muchrach Lishmaya. At the very end, you will be forced to ultimately fulfill all the mitzvahs. You'll ultimately keep coming back until all those mitzvahs are fulfilled. You will need to come back in multiple reincarnations because of this. Until the last, very final incarnation, you'll keep coming back until your deeds, until your actions are rectified and refined. That's Vahaya Ekev Tishma. So fascinating, says the Kedushas Levi, that the end of our parsha and the beginning of next week's parsha deal with what happens when we don't fulfill the mitzvahs now. Vahaya Ekev, at the end, will keep coming back. So he says, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us now in Parshas Veschanan at the very end, to do everything now, to accomplish what we can now, so that we will not need to come back for multiple gilgulim. Because to come back is not an easy experience for the neshama, as we're about to see. The reincarnation is not something that the soul desires. It's not a pleasant experience for the neshama. As a matter of fact, the Kedushas Levi is going to tell us the punishments of Gehenna are better in terms of the soul's perspective than having to come back in another incarnation. So this is what the pasuk is telling us at the end of the parsha. Keep the shamarta es hachukim ves hamishpatim asher anochi mitzavacha hayom la'asosam. Keep them today. Keep them in this lifetime. Fulfill what we can in this lifetime. V'haya ekev tishman. And if you don't, safe call safe. Ekev at the very end. Tishmun, you will ultimately come back multiple times until Tishmun, until you fulfill all of the mitzvahs. That's the juxtaposition. This lifetime, the next lifetime, end of this parsha, beginning of next week's parsha, end of this lifetime, beginning of the next lifetime. That's why the parsha is sort of divide in the middle of this seemingly same clause, because it's talking about two different lifetimes. So this concept, says the Arizal, is that says the Kedushas Levi, quoting the Arizal, that everything that we don't rectify now, that we don't refine now, that we don't fix now, we have to come back. And coming back, as we're going to see now, is not an easy prospect for the neshama. And once we understand this idea of the neshama coming back to multiple gugulim, we could understand now a very difficult Gemara to understand. The Gemara Masechtas Eruvin speaks about a machlekes between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And the machlekes is it better for man to be created or not? That's a very difficult Gemara to understand. What do you mean it's better to not be created? How can there even be an opinion that it's better not to be created? Hashem created us. And he created us teva hatev lehetiv, because he wants to bestow good upon us. So yes, this world is difficult and it has difficult experiences, and we go through all kinds of trials and tribulations, but ultimately we're created for the fulfillment of the purpose of all of creation. So how could there even be an opinion? And not only that, but the Gemara Paskins there, the Gemara decides that between the two opinions, it's better to have not been created. But once we're created, then we should try to live the best life that we can. That's how the Gemara ends there. But what do you mean it's better not to have been created? The whole Gemara doesn't make sense. How do we understand that? How could you say it's better not to have been created? Life is precious. We understand the sanctity and the kedusha of the holiness of every moment of life. How could we say it's better not to have been created? It's only in this world that we could fulfill the ruts and the elyon. So how could the Gemara say that? Says the Kedushas Levi, now that we understand the end of Parshas Eschanan, we can understand what this Gemara is talking about. Doesn't mean it's better to have never been created. That's not what the Gemara is saying. Take a look at what he says here. And with this, we can explain the Gemara, that difficult Gemara, Teiv la'adam shalei nivra, that the Gemara decides that in those two opinions, is it better for man to have been created, to have not been created? The Gemara decides, Tov l'adam shalom nivra, better to have not been created. But now that he's created, yifashish b'maisa, we should examine our actions and try to live the best possible life that we could live. How do we understand? So says the Kedushas Levi, no, we're not meant to understand it at its most simplistic level. Rather, this Gemara is talking also about reincarnation. What does it mean it's better to have not been created? Dahainu toiv shalei nivra mishenivra means it's better to have not been created than be created, means ratzalemar mishia nitzrach lavei behu. It's better not to have to come back a second time. It's not talking about our first creation. It's talking about being created again, being reincarnated again. It's better to fulfill everything that we can now, to rectify everything that we can now, rather than have to be recreated over again and coming back down into this world through reincarnation. That's what the Gemara is talking about. The achshav shenivra, but now that we are here, now that we were incarnated again in another incarnation, Yefashvish b'maisav. Let us all examine our deeds. That's what the Gemara is saying, so that we don't have to go through this experience again. Let's examine our actions. Shiumaisav mitukanim, to make sure that all of our actions are rectified and refined. B'chtei shelo yitztarech lavei b'gevulim, so that we won't have to be reincarnated again. Take a look at the footnote on Kuf Mem Gimel. It's a little bit small there, but Kuf Mem Gimel. So he explains this in the footnote. Again, just gives a deeper insight into reincarnation here. Perush, what does it mean? It's better to have not been created. Shekai al briyasei pam shnia. It refers to the second creation of us. It refers to our reincarnation, l'sakin ma shekilko, in order to rectify that which we damaged in a previous incarnation. That's what the Gemara means. It would have been better for man to have not needed to be recreated. That's what the Gemara is referring to. It would be better not to need the reincarnation experience. And he quotes one of the early Hasidic masters, the Ber Mayim Chaim, who explains why. Why is it that reincarnation is so difficult for the neshama? So he says, the Ber Mayim Chaim, Herich b'teicheches musar, he gives a lengthy sort of rebuke in his sefer, to those who do not utilize their time in Eilam Hazeh, in this world, to serve Hashem properly, to those who damage others, to those who are not fulfilling everything that they're meant to fulfill. V'kasav, and he writes, Shehu chasaron shlo yuchol limnais, when we are lacking something in our own Avodas Hashem, when we've damaged something and we don't repair it, that is a damage that we are often unable to rectify once our life is over. And sometimes the damage that we've done in this world is to such an extent that there is no rectification for it other than coming back and trying to refine it, trying to fix it, coming back down into an incarnation. And says the Ber Mayim Chaim, for the soul, the reincarnation experience is a painful experience. She'ein kashem emenu. It is, in fact, from all of the punishments in Gehenna, to have to come back and be reincarnated is from the worst. Because the punishments, the afflictions of Gehenna are momentary. They're a momentary cleansing of the soul. And after the soul is cleansed, he never has to go through that experience again. The soul is cleansed through the tribulations of Gehenna, the momentary experiences of Gehenna. That cleanses the soul, and the soul now finds itself, if it doesn't have to come back here again, in its abode in Gan Eden, where it's now basking in the Ziva Shechina, and it's cleansed from all of the damages and mistakes. That's for Gehenna. But if the sin, if the mistake, if the lack was so much that it can only be fulfilled through the neshama coming back, which is the vast majority of us. The vast majority of us now today are reincarnated. We've probably been here many times, trying to work oftentimes on the same things. You know, those parts of Avodas Hashem that we struggle with, right? We all have those areas in Bein Adam L'Chavera and Bein Adam L'Makam that we may struggle with. Those are usually signs of the things that we need to rectify. So if it cannot be rectified through Gehenna, it has to be rectified through coming back here again. But Gehenna is temporary, it's momentarily. But if the neshama has to come back to this world again, you do a lakol. It's known to all of us. The difficulties of the often tragedies that we have to go through in Eilam Hazeh. And here's the thing, you know, difficulties never end. They just change circumstances. But from the time we're born, until the time we leave this world, life is never simple and easy and just smooth. There's always something that we're dealing with. And oftentimes when we're dealing with something, some difficulty or an obstacle, or whatever it may be, we feel, okay, when this is over, then I will be in a place where I can be able to. But then there's something else. There's life is one constant difficulty. And again, some people have more difficulty, some people have less, some people have those that are known to everybody, some people have those that are only known to themselves and those very close to them. But nobody has an easy life. I say this all the time, but the only people that have an easy life are people we don't know well. That's just the reality. Anyone who we know well, anyone who could peer behind the curtains of their lives, everyone has their struggles. And it seems she'ein shiur ve'erech, and it seems those struggles have no end. So for the neshama to experience this world with all of the greatness and all of the barachas of being able to fulfill the Ratzon HaElyon, but after going through a life with all of its challenges, and those challenges are different. Some people have financial challenges, some people have challenges with family, some people have challenges with health, etc. And oftentimes we have all of the above at different stages of life. So for the neshama to have to go through all of this again, with all of those challenges again, with a Yetzer Hara, with a Nefesh Bahamas, not knowing will we rise to the occasion and still be as religious as we were, as connected to Hashem and Torah as we are. Who knows what we will be in another incarnation? Who knows what kind of animalistic soul that we'll have and we'll have to struggle with again. The neshama doesn't want that. It's a very painful experience. Says the Be'er Mayim Chaim, in my life, I've never seen or heard of a Jew who says, this life is all good and easy. He says, I've never met that Jew yet, who said, or even that human being, who says, Eilam Haza, cakewalk, piece of cake, easy, Eilam Haza. No, we all have struggles. We all have something else that we're struggling with. This one struggles with children. This one struggles financially. And this one struggles in health. And as I said, sometimes it's all the above. There's no moment in this life where we have tranquility, where we're not struggling with something. And on top of all of the challenges, we have the challenges of serving Hashem and making sure that our Avedis Hashem is karoi, is proper as it should be. And we're often challenged through difficult through our animalistic soul that yearns for sins, that yearns to transgress the word of Hashem. Whether it's lighter averas or more severe averas, Rahman al-Islam. So on top of all of the challenges and all of the difficulties, we have the difficulty of Avedas Hashem in this world, with an animal soul in a physical world trying to live a spiritual existence. The nimsa, so it comes out from all of this. That if a person, after living a full life in this world, that he strives to serve Hashem with constantly in our Aveda, the yechzer achas mehena, but he's lacking in our Aveda. The person's lacking in their Aveda. We'll have to come back. So if we've damaged something or somebody in this world, or we've damaged our relationship to Hashem, or we've damaged our relationship to other people, we have to come back and fix that. Yeah. That's the whole point. There is no guarantee. We don't know. That's exactly the point. Oh, that's part of our rectification process. But Farah asked the question, what's the guarantee that the next incarnation is going to be better? That's exactly what the Kedushas Levi is saying. That's why it's so painful for the soul. That's why the soul doesn't want to come back down. Who says I'm going to be better in the next life? This is exactly what the end of Parshas Veschanan is teaching us. So do everything now. Fix everything now. This is Moshe Rabbeinu's advice to Klal Yisrael in our Parsha. Fix everything now. What a beautiful message right before Tisha B'Av, which is Veschanan always comes in the week of Tisha B'Av. Let's fix everything now. If we fix it all now, Emir Hashem, 2 days from now, we won't be on the floor and singing Eicha. We'll be in the Beis HaMikdash. Vadai she'ein einish kasha umara kazen. Exactly what you said, Farah. This is what the Ber Mayim Chaim says. This is the worst punishment for the neshamas to have to come back down, because who says it's going to be any better with all of its challenges? Lahabit pam shenis behevli eilam hazeh. To have to come back down a second time to all the vanities of Elam Hazeh, the Paga, the Lilchem im Yitzray, and all of the difficulties, to go to once again to battle with another Yetzirah Tamid, which is a constant battle. The Kula Haibulai on the perhaps maybe Im Yisakin will rectify that which we didn't do in a previous Gilgal. Like after Yikalkal Eichel, because there's the very real possibility that will cause more damage in this incarnation. So yeah, this is the reincarnation is not an easy experience for the neshama. It's not what the neshama wants. So this is exactly the exhortation of Moshe Rabbeinu in the very last pasuk of Parshas Vayikra. Fulfill everything hayom la'aseisam, because if not, haya akev tishmun, you have to come back safe, call safe akev at the end. You'll come back and you'll keep coming back until akev, until at the end tishmun, you will observe all the mitzvahs. That's the juxtaposition between the end of this week's parsha and the beginning of next. Okay, let's go a little bit further here. Ubezeh nir levayer perush hamedrash, and now he explains the medrash based upon all of this idea. Medrash v'haya akev. There's a fascinating medrash in the beginning of Parshas Akev that seemingly all the Meforshi HaMedrash are perplexed. What in the world does this topic have to do with Akev? No one understands it. But says the Kedushas Levi, if we understand the more mystical dimension of these verses, that they're talking about reincarnation, we can understand this perplexing medrash that's brought. Because all of the Tanoim understood Kabbalistic mystical ideology as well. It just wasn't meant to be taught to the public, so they didn't teach it publicly. But they all understood. So oftentimes the Midrashim and even the Agadata in the Gemaras are sort of laden with clues and mystical interpretations to more mystical realities. And here's a perfect example. He brings a medrash in the beginning of next week's parsha. V'zeloshen, and this is the lashon of the medrash. And again, all the Meforshi medrash, all the midrashic commentators struggle with what in the world is this doing here in Parshas Akev. So let's take a look. What does the medrash say? The medrash says halacha. Again, this is the medrash in the very beginning of Parshas Akev, in the very beginning of Devarim Rabbah in Parshas Akev. So he says, Adam Yisrael sheyesh lo menorah she'asyu prakim. It says a Jew who has a candelabra, a candlestick, a menorah. She'asyu prakim, that's made of different parts. Mahu latalto b'Shabbos. If the parts are all separate from one another, are you allowed to be metalto? Are you allowed to move them? Are you allowed to engage with them on Shabbos? Umasit, and the Medrash concludes the mutal latalto b'Shabbos. Yes, you can engage with the different parts of the candlestick, because even though the whole candlestick is obviously muksa on Shabbos, but a piece of the candlestick that's not put together, the candlestick comes in prakim, says the Medrash, you're able to engage with it on Shabbos. You're able to utilize those pieces on Shabbos for whatever Shabbos purpose you can. That's the Medrash. Has nothing to do with Akev. Has nothing to do with the Parsha. And all the Meforshim Medrash ask the question, Medrash nifla ma'ain kol chai lahavina. Says the Kedushas Levi, everybody struggles to understand this Medrash. Nifla me'ain kol chai. Everybody alive, says the Kedushas Levi, struggles to understand this Medrash. Ma inyan zeh le'akev tishman. What in the world is muksa on Shabbos, a candlestick broken up into different parts, and whether it's muksa or not on Shabbos, what does that have to do with Akev Tishman? What does that have to do with the Parsha? Has nothing to do with the Parsha. It's seemingly a completely out-of-place medrash. Parsha's not talking about Shabbos there. Amnam, it says the Kedushas Levi, if you're sensitive to the inner, deeper, more mystical, Kabbalistic explanation of these verses, you'll understand exactly what that medrash is alluding to. Amnam hine yedua hamachlekes ben hamukubalim lemachakre ha'elukim. There's a difference of opinion when it comes to the Kabbalists and the Jewish philosophers. Be'inyan adam asher nisgalgo b'kama gilgulim, a person who's reincarnated multiple times. So the question that they dealt with was be'ezu guf yischadesh, that which body comes back at tchiyas hamesim. Which body comes back? Is it our first body? Is there a last body that did the final rectification? Is it some body in between? Because many of us have been reincarnated multiple times, right? So which one of us comes back? This is the question that the Mukubalim and that the Jewish philosophers were dealing with. Shadasa Mukubalim baguf harishon. Many of the Kabbalists say the first body comes back. I think Lurianic Kabbalah, like the Arizal, says every single nitzutz comes back. Every incarnation comes back. But anyway, so this is, but he's saying here, so some Kabbalists say the first body comes back. V'das HaMechakrim and the philosophers say, B'gufa Achron, the last body comes back. V'li nira b'derech mamutza. Says the Kedushas Levi, I'm going to give a middle interpretation, an interpretation between the two. Dehine yedua. He says it's known Shiramach mitzvahs aseh, that the 248 positive commandments correspond the Rimach Evorim, to the 248 limbs of a human being. V'shasa loisase, and the 365 negative prohibitions, heim neged shasa gidim, correspond to 365 veins and sinews in the human body. In other words, every mitzvah corresponds to a different element of the human body. And our job is to rectify and through all of the mitzvahs, refine our entire body, our entire physical existence through fulfillment of all the mitzvahs that we can fulfill. The call aver who neged mitzvah prati. So every limb, every aspect of the human body corresponds to a different mitzvah. The Kamoishi do Maimer Chazal, Avram Avinu Olav Shalom Kiyum Afilu Erev Tavshilin. As the Chazal say that Avram Avinu fulfilled the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, which clearly wasn't even given yet. So how did Avram Avinu fulfill a mitzvah without knowing what the mitzvah would be? Because he understood through his body, through the limbs of his body, he had a spiritual awareness of what mitzvah that corresponds to spiritually. And he was able to refine every element of his body. This is what it means. He kept the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin. He was able to refine the limb of the body that connects to Erev Tavshilin. Shukeda Mantera. How did Avram Avinu fulfill the mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin before the giving of the Torah? Amnam Vasaga Sevarim Shalo, through truly understanding the spiritual component of every aspect of his physical body. He was able to understand spiritually which mitzvah corresponded to even before the mitzvah was given, and how to refine it even before Hashem gave us the instruction on how to refine it. This was Avram Avinu's spiritual awareness. So we understand that the whole point here is we understand that every element of the body corresponds to a spiritual reality that connects to a mitzvah. The nimsa kasha adam hu mekayim kol kula. So when a person fulfills each mitzvah, hu misaken hu mashlim called binyan gufay, he rectifies and refines the whole structure of his body, which is our purpose here in Eilam Hazeh, to refine the body that we were given and the animal soul that we were given. The 248 positive, 368 negative, whichever aspect and element of the body they correspond to, with guarding ourselves from transgressing a negative commandment, refines 365 different parts of our bodies, and fulfilling the positive commandments refine 248 parts of our body. When I'm lacking in a mitzvah or I transgress a negative commandment, then I do spiritual damage to that particular limb that connects to that mitzvah. Mitzvah. And then it's as if spiritually I'm missing that limb. I'm missing that piece of me spiritually, and therefore I have to keep coming back until I'm able to fulfill, then build my entire physical body spiritually. So therefore, a person who is lacking in their Aveda, a person who's transgressed a positive commandment or a negative commandment, we do damage to one of those limbs spiritually, to one of our limbs spiritually. We're lacking that limb. That's the spiritual component of that limb, shu neged esei mitzvah, which corresponds to that mitzvah that I've damaged. And therefore, in order to complete my body spiritually, I have to go through many reincarnations until I've rectified and fulfilled all the mitzvahs. That's why the Arizal says, sometimes we come back as a male, sometimes we come back as a female, sometimes we come back as a Kohen, sometimes we come back as a Levi, to give the neshama the opportunity to fulfill every mitzvah. Some mitzvahs are dependent on women, some mitzvahs are dependent on men, some are dependent on being in Eretz Yisrael, etc., etc. But through fulfilling what I am able to fulfill, I heal, I bring spiritual healing to every limb that corresponds to every different mitzvah. Until I'm able to build spiritually every component of my body, but tachas hashlemus, with complete wholeness. So I have to keep coming back. If I'm transgressing, let's say I'm not lighting Shabbos candles, or I'm not putting on tefillin, whichever is connected to us, whether male or female. If I miss putting on tefillin, I could put on tefillin tomorrow, but I'll never get back today. I'll never get back that mitzvah of that I lack today, and that lack is very difficult to fill, and therefore we have to keep coming back. This is until we fulfill all of the mitzvahs and build every aspect of our body. This is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us in the end of Parshas Haman. Shemart es achum mispashim hayom. Do them now in this incarnation. V'lechein b'tchias hamesim be'es asher yikabetz Hashem kol nitchi Yisrael v'nikvatzam. Therefore, the time of tchias hamesim, when Hashem will gather us all together with all of those who He's gathered. As I call echad v'echad miYisrael yinishlam b'binyan gufay. Then in tchias hamesim we'll be whole. At that moment we'll be spiritually whole. V'nafshay b'gufay v'nafshay, physically and spiritually. But tachas hashlemus, in a pure wholeness, in a complete wholeness. But that wholeness, tchias hamesim, is waiting on us. It's waiting on us to rectify what we need to rectify, so that we will be whole by tchias hamesim. Dahainu kishi yiroi lavoi b'heichel hamelech. By tchias hamesim, we have to be fitting to be able to come into the Heichel HaMelech, to come into the king's chamber in the Messianic era. We don't want to be missing any limbs by tchias hamesim. And how do we do this? Through gathering all of our limbs in all of these incarnations, through the mitzvahs that we fulfill. Every limb that we sort of rectify is another limb that we're gathering to ourselves, that we're completing and healing for ourselves, but called Gilgul v'Gilgul in every incarnation, so that by the end of time, by Tchias HaMesim, we'll be totally whole. And those limbs that are healed and brought whole in every incarnation, every limb that we heal, every mitzvah that we do in this world, every act of refinement that we do in this world causes us to gather together these various limbs and ultimately build our bodies complete, so that by Tchias HaMesim we will be complete.
We'll have different parts of the thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's saying. Until by Tchias HaMesim. So let's say we've been here 6 or 7 times. Each one of those times we're rectifying different limbs, so that now these 6 or 7 different people, so to speak, are all reincarnated. I should say, are all resurrected by Tchias HaMesim. But that brings one whole person. So yeah, many of us, we could be a part. We could all right here around this table all be a composite of one body, exactly, all rectifying different limbs that we've messed up, and we all come together by Tchias HaMesim. So and as one entity. I mean, we'll be our own separate entities, but we are all interconnected as one to make that gufay shalom. The tachas l'shlem is makal esnei varam hashlamim metakim, through all of the limbs that we've rectified. All yidei kal givulim, through all of the rectifications, lishum chsaron klal v'klal, and hopefully without any lack at all. Now, through that understanding, now we can understand what that medrash is talking about. Remember the medrash with the candelabra pieces? This is what it's talking about. The candelabra pieces refer to the various limbs of the body, the various incarnations. He says, moving ha-medrash. Now, remember, according to the Kedushas Levi, Haya Ekev Tishmun is talking about reincarnation. It's talking about having to come back multiple times until at the end we fulfill everything. And then the Medrash there talks about this broken menorah. This broken candelabra of different pieces. What's the Medrash? And nobody can understand what the Medrash is talking about. Says the Kedushas Levi. This is what the Medrash is talking about. Halacha Adam Yisrael sheyesh lo menorah. A Jew who has a menorah. Sha'asuya prakim ma'u l'taltel b'Shabbos. That's made up of different pieces. Can you engage with it on Shabbos? Ki yedua, says the Kedushas Levi. Here's the interpretation mystically of that Medrash and why it's connected to Akev. Ki yedua the gufa adam nikra menorah. The menorah refers to our guf, our body. The menorah is the body. Kamei shekasu ner havaya nishmas adam. Right? The candle is the soul. Ner havaya nishmas adam. What holds the candle? The candlestick. What holds the soul? The body. The body is the menorah. Kashanashama kriya ner. The soul is called the light. Im kain haguf nikra menorah. If the soul is the light, the body must be the candlestick. Asher haner aimed, which the light is standing on, which holds the light. The zeh shilas hamedrash, and this is what the medrash is asking. Adam Yisrael sheyesh lo menorah, a Jew who has a menorah, shahainu guf, meaning a physical body, sha'asuya prakim, that's broken up into different pieces. What does it mean, different pieces? Ratzolema shenislake v'niskabes meivarim mitukanim. The human being is broken up into many different limbs that have to be rectified and refined in many different gilgulim. Like I said, all of us here may be different pieces of one body. So all of these different pieces, all of these unrefined limbs, so to speak, are all these different pieces of the menorah. So the so the body is made up of all of these different pieces that are trying to be rectified and refined, all you degugulim, through coming back in the various incarnations, reincarnations. Can you engage with it on Shabbos? What is Shabbos referring to? Shabbos is referring to Yom Shekulei Shabbos, the Messianic era. Shabbos is Me'ain Mashiach. Hainu la'asid, it's referring to the Messianic era. Hanikra Yom Shekulei Shabbos. So the question the menorah is asking, Dainu im aisei guf b'binyan ha'avarim elu, this body that's made up of all of these different reincarnations. Can you engage with it on Shabbos? Can this body that's made up of all of these different pieces, all of these different reincarnations and different generations, can this body come together on Shabbos, on the day of Mashiach, on Tchias HaMesim? Can this body enter into the Heichal HaMelech? Because initially it was only created with one body. The candelabra was initially one whole candelabra. And now these limbs that now new bodies were created, so to speak. New reincarnations were created in order to help rectify and refine the various limbs that were unrefined in the previous incarnation. The Efshar Haim K'may Muksa. So maybe these new incarnations, which is us, right? None of us are the original body. Most of us are not a neshama chadasha. The neshama chadasha comes into the world today. It's usually a great tzaddik. But for the vast majority of us, we're on our, 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th Gilgul, whatever it may be. So the question is the different pieces. We are all different pieces. The menorah that's broken up into the different pieces, that's us. Like I said, all of us around this table may all be different pieces of one body. What about these different pieces? Can you engage with them on Shabbos? Can they come into the Heichal HaMelech by Tchias HaMesim? Remember, the question was, is it the first incarnation? Is it the last incarnation? Says the Kedushas Levi, this medrash is telling you every piece is not muksa on Shabbos. Every piece of the menorah, every reincarnation, every piece of that menorah, every new gilgul that refines a new part of the body that will come into the Heichal HaMelech on Shabbos will experience Tchias HaMesim. And the reason why that medrash is here is because Akev is talking about reincarnation. That's what the medrash is talking about. That's why it's placed here. It's not just talking about Hilchos Shabbos. It's talking about something much deeper than Hilchos Shabbos. It's talking about all the different reincarnations come to experience Tchias HaMesim. So, right, we know by Muksa, anything that I did not have in mind to use on Shabbos, anything that wasn't originally created Erev Shabbos, I can't use on Shabbos. Well, our bodies are reincarnated souls. We're not part of the original plan. The original plan was that our original soul should refine everything. We are only sort of plan B because that soul didn't refine. So therefore, we're coming back. So can our souls experience Shabbos? And in the Medrash Paskins, it's not Muksan Shabbos. They can experience Shabbos. We can experience Chias. That's what the Kedushas Levi says. Is it the first body? Is it the last body? Says the Kedushas Levi. It's every part of the menorah. It's everybody experiences Chias Mason. Kamesha Amru Inyan. Kamesha Amru Inyan is as it's Umasik the Mutter Latalto B'Shabbos. The Gemara concludes. Mutter l'taltal b'Shabbos. You can bring them in on Shabbos. You can utilize them on Shabbos. Ki loy mechudashim heimi kara. They're not as if they never existed before. Ki mitchila loy nivra ela ba'esan ha'yivarim. Because even though originally it was the first body that was created and that was the original goal, shepagam v'kilkul esam, but that body did damage to certain limbs. And through being reincarnated into us in this Gilgul, we are able to rectify them. But it's not as if we were never a part of that original plan. Okay, let's just finish off this. Let's go to the last paragraph there. Just finish off this last paragraph because we're going to run out of time. And this, says the Kedushas Levi, this is exactly the last pasuk in Parshas Hanan. This is what the pasuk is teaching us, this spiritual reality. The Torah could be understood on such a different multitude of levels. You have the simple pshat, you have the midrashic pshat, and here the Kedushas Levi is opening up our eyes. And this is why I love learning, because on our own, we would never see this incredible, beautiful insight in the last pasuk in Parshas Hanan. But when we learn the Kedushas Levi, he opens up our eyes and illuminates us and gives us an insight into Torah that we would never have it into our own lives. And this is what the last pasuk is teaching us. Fulfill the mitzvahs hayom la'asosam. Do them today, and then end of the parsha, meaning end of the first life. And if we don't do it today, Bahaya Akev at the very end, when we fulfill everything, Tishmun, after we fulfill everything, then Hashem will keep his covenant. The Hainu Lishmaya B'Pama Rishon, Moshe Rabbeinu is exhorting all of us, listen the first time. Get it all right in this incarnation. So that we will not have to come Bahaya Akev to Gebulim, L'Sakanesam, to rectify them. But if we do, says the Medrash, if we end up being a bunch of different parts of the candelabra, don't worry, we're not Muktzah Shabbos. On Yom Shekule Shabbos, every one of us will experience it. The Ima Yidei Gebulim Nischadshu Eivarim B'Chudashim L'Gamri Eich Yuchol Adam Livnei Skufay B'Pama Rishain Eivarim Acherim B'Chudashim. He says, and it's through, if it has to come through Gubulim, that we rectify our ourselves, our neshamas. As I said, most of us, or probably all of us, have experienced multiple Gubulim, but we should realize that all of us are ultimately part of that original soul that was created initially, and therefore every one of us will have an element of will experience Chias Amesim. Lechein Hizra Teira Shelo Yikalkul Eson, and therefore the Torah is telling us in the end of Parshas Hanan, let's make sure to get it right now. B'chtei Shelo Yitzarech Love B'Gilgulim, so that we shouldn't have to come back another time L'Sakan Eson, to rectify what we messed up now. And that's what we said. The Kniskalei, as I said earlier in the pasuk V'Haya Ekev Tishmun, Zeh Kavanas Maimer HaMedrash, and this is what the Medrash is telling us when it says V'Haya Ekev. It speaks about the broken up candelabra. It's speaking about the different Gilgulim, the different bodies that occupy all elements of one neshama. Kima V'Haya Ekev Nishvat Hashayla. Once we understand that we're talking about what V'Haya Ekev is talking about, the mystical reality of reincarnation, it answers the question of why that Medrash is here, Shemutar L'Taltal B'Shabbos, and that ultimately the Gemara concludes, or the Medrash concludes, that every one of us will experience Shabbos, that the candelabra broken up into different parts, the bodies that's housed, the multiple bodies that are housing multiple parts of the same neshama, rectifying it and refining it, we'll experience Shabbos La'elam Haba and Amir Hashem. What an auspicious shiur, I think, to learn right before Tisha B'Av. So let's rectify and refine now everything, and we should utilize this time period right before Tisha B'Av to really think what rectifications does my soul need? Where is it that I'm struggling that I have to be better at in my relationships, in my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever it may be? What can I refine now to ultimately bring that? Because when I refine myself, I refine the world. And the Mirza Hashem, let every single one of our refinements be the final refinements of ourselves, of our neshamas, of the world, so that when we experience Tisha B'Av, it won't just be simply, it won't be a Yom Tov, it won't be a day where we're sitting on the floor with egg and ashes and chanting Eicha, but it will be a Yom Tov of Simcha and Sasun, of Gila and Rina, the greatest Yom Tov of them all, with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'meir V'meinu. Amen. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And Mirza Hashem, we'll see everybody next week. Thanks for sharing that inspiring Kedushas lady with me. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Yeah.
Okay, so according
I don't know that I have all the answers, but yes.
According to this,
Yeah.
every single Gilgal
Yeah.
will have reached the perfect apex at the time of Moshiach. Will have been completed, right?
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think that, one of the things that we see by the story of Hanukkah, for example, where Hashem brought the salvation, even though it was only a tiny, tiny minority who actually stayed loyal and faithful and fought on behalf of Torah and Hashem. So I think it doesn't take all of us to reach that ultimate completion, because then you could say, well, when is that ever going to happen? That's all it takes is a small minority to finish the rectification job, and then Hashem will bring the rest of it on his own. And the Messianic era itself will be refining and rectifying for those who didn't fulfill it. So I don't know that we all need to get that state of rectification. I think of a handful of us get there. Yeah. Well, it will take a few neshamas, all of those parts of that neshama to bring about the Messianic era.
Between the time Mashiach comes and Tchias HaMesim, because with that
very true
clarity,
yeah, very true.
People will it will quickly, people will be able to quickly fulfill whatever it is.
Because now that very well could be
clarity. We're talking about states of clarity. Since Moshe Rabbeinu, who's giving this directive right now, so we've learned, he was a Gilgal of Hevel, he was a Gilgal of Noach. Do you think that Moshe Rabbeinu had a clarity about who he was a Gilgal with? Obviously, we've read things that he's refining of these people. Do you think he had a?
That's a very good question. I would say that's above my pay grade. I have no idea, but that's a very good question. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu did have spiritual clarity, obviously, that we can't even fathom or comprehend. So it's very possible. It says he was a rectification of Noach. So yeah. When he says macheni is meinayach, right? Macheni namasifrecha, macheni is meinayach. So yeah, I don't know whether Moshe Rabbeinu had that, and even exactly how all this will work, and we don't know. We're delving into devarim she'em beruma shel. So it's hard to really understand how these things will work and how it will be, and we don't really have all the answers. But every once in a while, someone like the Kedushas lady opens up the curtain and gives us a little peek behind the curtain. And hopefully that will empower our own Aveda and inspire us to do what we need to do here. For me, that was a really inspiring piece. So again, like I said in the very beginning, I had a completely different shiur planned. And then I learned this. I go, I have to share this. This is fascinating. This is great. And I'm particularly fascinated by this topic.
This guilt will happen right away. Like if somebody died,
it can, but not necessarily. Yeah. I don't know, and it could be everyone is different, and we don't know exactly the time frames and how it works. And sometimes it is. I would say usually it makes sense that it's pretty soon after, because the neshama has to be refined, has to be rectified. But so I would think that sometimes Hashem needs to wait until the circumstances happen where that soul comes into the proper circumstances. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Like I said, the neshama, again, is like the candelabra broken up into different parts. So whatever we refine and rectify here, that stays. And then a part of that neshama that's unrectified comes back. So when we're doing something at Ili Nishmas, our father, grandfather, grandparent, great grandparent, whatever it is, they're in the neshama that was rectified and refined. The main part of the neshama is still in Elam Haba. It does still receive that. So again, we're all broken off. We're broken up pieces. We're the candelabra broken up into many pieces. So primarily it is for the Jews because again, Goyim have a soul, Goyim have a Elam Haba, but they don't have the same responsibility of refinement of self, refinement of neshama, refinement of the world. That's what it means that the Jews were chosen. It doesn't mean we're somehow chosen superior to others. We're chosen for a harder responsibility, right? And so with that responsibility it carries with it everything else that comes with it. So reincarnation is part of that responsibility.
When we give it the geek, like the Rabbi or all that, does that mean that they're at their final stage of?
Those are usually, oftentimes, tzaddikim are usually neshamas, new neshamas that come down into the world to help inspire the rest of us. So the great tzaddikim are usually neshama mechudashim, like brand new neshamas, or neshamas that maybe came one time, or they haven't been here multiple times. These are lofty, lofty neshamas that have a different role. Yeah, they're the role of the tzaddik is they have a completely different. Yeah, exactly. Like I said this in Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe wrote a sefer called Sefer Shel Tzadikim, and their Aveda was completely different than Sefer Shel Beinanim, and for the rest of us. And that book was burned because it wasn't meant for the masses. People would think, oh, let me do that Aveda, but that's not our Aveda. So yeah, so again, we don't really understand how these things work, and that, again, we like to have all the answers. We can put everything in a puzzle that our finite minds understand. We sort of have the outskirts of understanding of all of these things. So, and again, I also want to make clear, do I say, could a non-Jew never experience it? I wouldn't say that either. I would say the purpose of it is for Jews, but can non-Jews experience it? Yeah, we see non-Jews come back as Jews, etc. Or a Jew comes back as a non-Jew and has to go through the conversion process. Who knows how all of these things work? We have a very superficial understanding of these spiritual realities. So
just one more thing.
Yes.
Sorry. So you know how we just did in Tanya last week, that this world is, in one sense, even greater than the next world, which is Neheneb
Right.
Hashchina.
Right.
Here you have the direct connection with a mitzvah to the Ratzon Hashem. So in that instance, it's greater. So a neshama that has complete clarity, right, in the next world, why would it suffer to know that it once again is going to have this opportunity to be even closer to Hashem?
For exactly the same reason that we mentioned, because who says that it will be? Because if it doesn't, it's very painful for the neshama. And it's like, the neshama doesn't want to have to experience that Nisayan again. So yeah, if the neshama is able to overpower the Nefesh Bahamas, but look at the fraction of Jewish people who are alive today who are religious Shomer Torah. It's a fraction of a fraction. I mean, we're growing, but it's a fraction of a fraction. What are the odds that we'll be in that fraction again? The neshama doesn't want to take that chance and have to go through that painful experience if it's not. So yeah, if it is, you're right. It accomplishes a tremendous amount that what it can accomplish in the next world. But who says that it will be? And nobody wants to take that chance. The neshama does not want to take that chance of having to go back down. So yeah, it's a Elam Haz is a double-edged sword. The challenges are unlike any other in Elam Haba, but the rewards are also like no other in Elam Haba. So, but the neshama is afraid to deal with that Nisayan again, to deal with that test again.
Can a neshama regress?
Absolutely, neshama can regress. As the Kedushas Levi says, exactly that.
Things that they don't accomplish it, and then
absolutely, yes, very much so. That's because just Levi says that's why it's so painful in the neshama, because who says it's going to come back? Maybe it'll do more damage. So Absolutely. That's our whole Bechira. We have free choice. So, yeah.
Right here, we're learning about this. How does someone who's not, doesn't know, right? We always say somebody who doesn't do a mitzvah because they don't know,
Mhm.
they can't really blame them.
Right. They're not held at the same level of
They didn't
spiritual
get the education,
responsibility.
They didn't get the knowledge. So
Yeah.
how can we, all of these Jews that are here that are not knowledgeable about any of this, how can we expect them to rectify whatever they're here for?
Right. The truth is that is true. That's why the Rebbe's mission was to educate Jews all over the world, to send out emissaries all over the world to educate uplift Jewish communities all over the world for exactly that reason. That's very true. That's very true. And for you can imagine for the neshama that's lost in that situation, how painful it is. So yeah, very, very true.
Oh, can I change the subject for one
Yes,
second?
yes.